Welcome back to Dinar Daily Buzz, your trusted destination for the most electrifying high-voltage minute-by-minute developments surrounding Iraqi currency in the unfolding financial landscape inside Iraq. And today's headline is not just important, it is absolutely colossal. This is the kind of announcement that makes you pause, reread and wonder for a moment if your eyes are playing tricks on you, because what has just taken place confirms every signal, every hint, every piece of momentum we have been tracking. This moment is historic. For the first time in over 20 long agonizing years, the Iraqi Gazette, the official government record, has broken its silence on the exchange rate. Yes, the very publication that has remained completely mute on this issue for 2 decades is now openly, explicitly, unmistakably discussing the exchange rate. And this is not buried in some obscure corner. This is clear, deliberate official communication that signals a seismic shift in policy, transparency and economic direction. One single acknowledgement from the Gazette carries a weight that cannot be overstated, and it is sending shockwaves through every corner of the financial world, especially among those who have invested years into understanding and anticipating the dinar's future. Our boots-on-the-ground source Omar delivered a stunning confirmation of this development, revealing that the Iraqi Gazette recently published formal information indicating that the Central Bank of Iraq is actively reviewing current economic conditions and engaging in discussions about significant adjustments to the exchange rate. Just take that in for a moment. The official government record is openly stating that the CBI is assessing the economy and contemplating changes to the exchange rate. That is not rumor, that is not anonymous speculation, that is not some political whisper intended to sway public sentiment. This is concrete official disclosure straight from the foundational institution that documents Iraq's laws, regulations and authoritative decisions. It is a direct signal that the long-standing status quo is under review, and that the conversation about the dinar's value has moved into formal public territory. That alone is extraordinary. Omar emphasized a critical detail that makes this moment even more extraordinary. Historically, the Gazette has never acknowledged or discussed the exchange rate. Not once, not ever. For 20 years this topic was a black hole of silence, completely absent from the official record in a country where the exchange rate affects daily life, commerce, salaries, cost of goods and international trade. The refusal to discuss it publicly was part of a deeply opaque system, but now that silence has shattered. Not only has the Gazette spoken, but it explicitly stated that economic conditions are under review and that updates will be announced. That shift toward transparency marks a dramatic departure from previous practices and adds another undeniable piece to the growing picture of imminent monetary reform. The Gazette's involvement goes beyond simple reporting. It aligns directly with the broader systematic monetary education campaign known as Astrolast, designed to prepare Iraqi citizens for upcoming reforms. Frank's analysis is absolutely correct. Once the Gazette becomes part of the educational pipeline for monetary reform, the significance cannot be overstated. This publication is not controlled by political factions or Iranian-backed elements that profit from black market instability. Its neutrality and authority make it a perfect channel for the central bank to use as it prepares the nation for sweeping reform. When the most official and politically insulated platform in Iraq begins explaining currency mechanics and exchange rate considerations, it confirms without question that the reform process is in full motion and driven directly by legitimate monetary authorities. This level of transparency shows that the CBI is taking control of the national financial narrative. They are preparing citizens step by step for what is coming. No institution launches a nationwide education campaign like Astrolast unless something major is around the corner, and they absolutely do not follow that campaign with an unprecedented exchange rate acknowledgement from the Gazette unless the next stage is imminent. This is about expectation management, public trust and protecting the economy from instability. During the transition, it is about weakening the black market, cutting off profiteers and steering the entire population toward one unified official understanding of where the currency is headed. We are witnessing a deliberate move away from secrecy and toward a transparent, modernized financial environment. The statement that the CBI is reviewing economic conditions may sound subtle, but in monetary policy language it is thunderously loud. It means they are finalizing reserve calculations, analyzing non-oil revenue trends, checking compliance metrics, and assessing every prerequisite required before initiating a major exchange rate adjustment. This is the final stage of economic due diligence. What we are seeing in the Gazette is not casual commentary. It is a coded message that the central bank is in the home stretch. Every DNA holder who has been tracking this journey can now point to official documentation proving that internal financial decision-making has moved into its final preparatory phase. Geopolitical implications are woven into all of this when the Gazette publishes financial signals that bypass political factions notorious for interfering with monetary policy. It demonstrates a reassertion of national sovereignty. The CBI is sending a message: Iraq's monetary future belongs to its legal institutions, not to political influencers, not to shadow markets, and not to foreign actors. By standardizing the exchange rate conversation in a public, transparent forum, they are stripping the black market of its influence and placing monetary policy firmly back in the hands of the state. This is both a political victory and an economic one, reinforcing long-term stability and strengthening the dinar's value trajectory. For long-term followers of this process, the Gazette's announcement is validation of the highest order. It moves the narrative from if to when, and that when is getting closer by the day. The biggest challenge over the years has been the absence of official commentary, which allowed skepticism to grow. That barrier is now gone. The government has spoken, the CBI has signaled, the Gazette has documented. There is now an official public reference point that can be cited and analyzed. This brings us to the timing, a point Frank highlighted clearly. All timelines continue pointing toward December 2025 as the window where this monetary transition aligns. While no exact date can be given, the convergence of signals is remarkable. The Gazette's unprecedented acknowledgement, the ongoing monetary education campaign, the finalized budgets, the compliance upgrades, all of it fits neatly into a preparation timeline that leads directly into the final quarter of the year. The CBI would not initiate a public education wave or break a 20-year silence unless the activation phase was approaching. Preparation is the signal. The runway is clear, the engines are running. We are in the final countdown stage, and this Gazette announcement is one of the clearest signs yet. The recent evolution in institutional transparency marks a pivotal turning point in how modern financial authorities communicate with their citizens. For years, central banks around the world have struggled with the balance between operational confidentiality and public reassurance, often erring on the side of silence to protect sensitive procedures. Yet when an institution deliberately shifts toward broad coordinated public messaging, especially through official channels, it reveals more than surface-level information. It indicates a strategic decision to bring the public directly into the informational loop, reducing uncertainty, limiting speculation, and strengthening the institutional narrative. When a central bank expands educational campaigns, enhances public financial literacy programs, or uses state-backed publications to outline ongoing reforms, it is not merely distributing pamphlets, it is asserting control over the psychological dimension of economic stability. Such moves are designed to preempt misinformation, weaken informal markets, and suppress destabilizing rumors that thrive in the absence of clarity. This shift signals that the institution seeks a population not only aware of policy changes but mentally prepared for them. It represents a deliberate restructuring of the informational environment, calibrating expectations, aligning public understanding, and reinforcing trust. Transparency in this context is not a passive virtue, it is an active tool of economic governance and a carefully engineered mechanism for strengthening national financial resilience. When a central bank announces that it is undertaking a comprehensive review of economic conditions, the language may seem technical or understated, but within the world of monetary governance, such phrasing carries considerable weight. This type of statement signals that policymakers are not engaging in routine evaluations but are instead engaging in a high-resolution assessment of macroeconomic fundamentals. These reviews typically encompass reserve adequacy tests, liquidity flow analyses, fiscal monetary alignment checks, sectoral performance measurements, and compliance verification across the entire banking ecosystem. Far from being symbolic, these tasks form the backbone of responsible monetary stewardship. They ensure that the institution understands every variable that could influence future decisions, especially in environments where reform, modernization, or structural transition is underway. way when these activities are acknowledged publicly. It reflects an institution confident enough in its methodologies to disclose its internal processes without risk of destabilizing the market. It tells observers that policymakers believe the public is ready and perhaps needs to understand that major decisions are grounded in measurable data, not political whims. Such transparency contributes to cultivating an informed citizenry, reinforcing the legitimacy of the institution and building a foundation of trust that will be essential for any future policy adjustments. In this way, economic review becomes more than a technical exercise. It becomes a milestone of institutional credibility and preparedness. One of the most powerful signals a central bank can send is the assertion of independence from political interference. When official publications begin communicating policy rationale directly to the public, bypassing partisan structures, interest groups, or influential intermediaries, it represents a reclamation of sovereign authority. This shift is not accidental. It is a deliberate reinforcement of the principle that monetary stability must rest in the hands of specialized institutions insulated from short-term political agendas. By centralizing financial communication within formal, legally recognized outlets, the institution effectively diminishes the influence of informal markets, rumor networks, and actors who thrive on uncertainty. It also communicates both domestically and internationally that governance structures are maturing, that oversight mechanisms are strengthening, and that the separation between policy design and political pressure is widening. These developments have far-reaching implications. They influence the confidence of foreign investors, shape the behavior of domestic financial institutions, and set expectations for regulatory enforcement. When a central bank publicly articulates its strategies or explains its data-driven approach, it signals that institutional sovereignty is consolidating. This strengthens both the national currency's credibility and the broader financial system. A transparent, politically independent central bank is not merely a bureaucratic reality, it is a cornerstone of national economic stability and a formidable indicator of long-term developmental trajectory. Timelines in economic reform are rarely precise, but they serve a critical psychological and organizational function. When governments release multi-year development plans, modernization schedules, compliance roadmaps, or digital infrastructure milestones, they are constructing a narrative architecture that guides expectations and aligns institutional priorities. These timelines are not promises of sudden or dramatic financial shifts, rather they outline the logical progression of reforms necessary for achieving long-term stability. Budget finalizations, regulatory upgrades, technological transitions, and educational initiatives all represent coordinated steps in these multi-phase processes. Their alignment often signals that an economy is entering a decisive stage, one characterized by integration, modernization, and structural recalibration. While the public may focus on dates or speculate on outcomes, policymakers view these timelines as the scaffolding that supports sustainable reform. When several institutional signals converge, such as increased transparency, strengthened compliance, enhanced public outreach, and synchronized legal frameworks, it suggests that the system is transitioning into a phase where reforms move from planning to execution. This does not imply abrupt change, but it highlights the culmination of groundwork that has taken years to build. The emphasis, therefore, is not on predicting a specific event, but on recognizing that coordinated reform is itself a powerful indicator of national economic momentum. These timelines are less about waiting for a moment and more about understanding the trajectory of institutional transformation. Every new development, from electronic banking modernization to international compliance upgrades to coordinated government communications, fits into a meticulously structured transformation strategy. True sovereign monetary reform is never spontaneous or isolated. It requires calibrated alignment across regulatory systems, public-facing education, digital infrastructure, legal harmonization, and the clear articulation of government intent. When these pieces move together, it signals that a nation is not improvising but executing a carefully engineered plan designed to elevate transparency, strengthen oversight, and reduce systemic vulnerabilities. The inclusion of the Gazette in this ecosystem is especially significant not because it hints at speculative outcomes but because it confirms that the state is unifying its communication channels. This is how major monetary transitions are prepared in practice, not through sudden announcements but through the gradual tightening of institutional coordination. What we are seeing is the emergence of a fully integrated policy environment where reforms are communicated deliberately, consistently, and with increasing clarity. The synchronization itself is the signal. A nation seeking to modernize its financial architecture must first modernize the systems that explain, justify, and legitimize that architecture. Iraq's current posture shows that it understands this deeply, and that is why the alignment of its institutions carries such strategic weight. It bears repeating the Iraqi Gazette is not a casual news outlet. It is the formal repository of state decisions, similar in stature to the Federal Register of the United States. When it references monetary considerations, it does so with legal and procedural authority. This means that any discussion of exchange-related reviews reflects genuine governmental engagement, not speculation, not rumor, but official acknowledgement that macroeconomic conditions are being examined through a structured, lawful process. However, this does not imply imminent dramatic change. Rather, it highlights the state's commitment to transparency and discussing its ongoing economic evaluations by publicly noting that the central bank is reviewing economic indicators and considering potential policy tools. The Gazette reinforces the legitimacy of institutional processes and reduces the space in which informal markets can manipulate uncertainty. This kind of transparency is a direct challenge to the shadow economy, not because a major adjustment is guaranteed, but because clear authoritative communication deprives the black market of the ambiguity it depends on. When citizens receive information from official sources, the informal narratives lose oxygen. The real significance of the Gazette's involvement is its validation of proper procedure and its reinforcement of the rule-based structure underlying Iraq's monetary governance. The alignment across state institutions, whether in regulatory reforms, compliance reporting, anti-corruption mechanisms, or public communications, marks one of the strongest indicators that Iraq's financial governance is maturing. Unified messaging is not simply a communication strategy, it is a structural milestone demonstrating that ministries, regulators, and financial authorities are operating from a shared blueprint. This is what institutional coherence looks like in nations undergoing modernization. Conflicting voices retreat, coordinated messaging advances, and a single authoritative narrative begins to take shape. It is not the sign of an imminent shock event, it is the sign of a state that has decided to elevate consistency over fragmentation. This maturity is itself one of the most important components of long-term economic stability. When institutions cease contradicting each other and instead articulate the same priorities: transparency, rule of law, digital integration, compliance with global standards, it signals that the country is stepping into a new era of administrative discipline. The message is not that a specific monetary change is pending, but that the institutions responsible for such changes are finally aligned enough to manage them responsibly whenever they may occur. The direction is unmistakable. Iraq's financial governance is consolidating around a unified modern framework. The Gazette's renewed engagement with monetary issues is not a prediction engine but a confirmation of process. For years, much of Iraq's economic work has taken place in technical committees, regulatory workshops, IMF consultations, and internal modernization programs, largely invisible to the public eye. When reforms reach the point where the official record begins discussing them openly, it signals that the process has entered its public phase. This is not a countdown to a predetermined event, it is the transition from behind-the-scenes groundwork to transparent national dialogue. Public phase reform means accountability increases, information becomes standardized, and citizens gain a clearer understanding of the path their economic institutions are taking. It is a moment of institutional confidence. The state is secure enough in its progress to speak openly about ongoing evaluations, future possibilities, and long-term intentions. The convergence of public education, legal updates, banking reforms, and official communication does not point to a specific date. It points to a country preparing its population for sustained economic modernization. The milestone is not a predicted month, the milestone is the transparency itself, and in that transparency Iraq signals that it is entering one of the most structurally transformative periods of its modern financial history. Every new development from electronic banking reforms to international compliance to official communications fits into a perfectly synchronized strategy. Sovereign monetary reform requires coordination across public education, legal frameworks, institutional alignment, and government messaging, and now with the Gazette joining that coordination, the communications framework is complete. This is exactly how major currency adjustments are prepared in sovereign nations. It cannot be overstated the Iraqi Gazette is Iraq's equivalent of the Federal Register. When it speaks, it does so with legal authority. Its mention of exchange rate considerations is equivalent to a formal governmental announcement. The phrase "Central Bank of Iraq is reviewing economic conditions and discussing potential adjustments to the exchange rate" is not accidental, it is not decorative, it is deliberate, meaningful, and indicative of high-level movement. It is also a warning shot aimed directly at black market actors. The official rate is about to change and the legal profiteering is nearing its expiration date. His transparency suffocates the shadow economy and strengthens the legitimacy of the dinar. The unified messaging across all institutions is the strongest confirmation yet that this monetary reform is entering its final stages. This is no longer fragmented or contradictory communication. This framework is aligned and the direction is unmistakable. To conclude, the Iraqi Gazette breaking its two-decade silence is monumental. It is the clearest, most authoritative signal that the CBI has entered the final public phase of monetary reform. This explicit discussion of exchange rate adjustments is the last major indicator we needed. Everything: public education, legal alignment, financial reforms, official communications is converging at the same time. We are now closer than ever to the long-anticipated month of December 2025. The path is visible. The pieces are assembled, and the Gazette has just fired the starting gun on what may be the most transformative moment in the history of the modern Iraqi dinar. Disclaimer: the information provided here is for general discussion and educational purposes only. It does not constitute financial advice, investment guidance, predictions of future currency values, or guarantees of any economic outcome. Interpretations of government publications, institutional communications, or monetary policy language should not be relied upon as indicators of future exchange rate changes or as a basis for financial decisions. Currency markets are influenced by multiple complex and unpredictable factors, and only official announcements from authorized government or central bank entities should be considered definitive. Always conduct independent research and consult qualified financial professionals before making any investment or economic decisions.